Natasha, and I am the Europe organiser here at 350. I'm covering for Emma, who's on sabbatical. To web workshops and the other ones that we've done recently, we're going to be talking about how to grow your campaign, introduce some new resources, and specifically talk about how you can use these ideas in preparing for the global divestment mobilisation. So yeah, it's just me tonight, and I'm also joined by my colleague Tim. Tim, do you want to say hi?
Hi everyone, I'm Tim Ratcliffe. I've been working with 350 now for the last 4 years and been involved in some of the divestment work from the start, so looking forward to share some of that experience with folks tonight.
Great, thanks Tim. So yeah, basically how this works is that you'll need to open the channel on YouTube in order to write comments and questions in the chat box. But as you're joining, if you could just join and say hi to everyone there, say where you're joining from in the world, that would be great. And yeah, so this is going to be in a couple of stages. First of all, I'm going to talk about a guide that I have written on how to grow your campaign, and specifically thinking about how to absorb new members after actions, but how to get more people on board at every point. If while I'm talking you have comments or questions, please do share them in the chat. Tim and I will then take some of those questions and have a conversation. And then Tim is going to be talking through a new presentation that we've made, talking through the kind of core DNA, the core ingredients of what makes fossil-free campaigning, so that there's a new resource that you can use to share with your group to get everyone on the same page, and especially if you're bringing in new members. So yeah, that is it basically. Cool. I think I will begin then. Tim, if you could share the guide that I'm going to be talking about in the chat box so everyone could see that, that would be great. So basically, this is a guide. It's called How to Grow Your Divestment Campaign. Great, I can see that that's up now. And yeah, divestment is about hitting the fossil fuel industry where it really hurts. It's about reputational damage. So getting institutions to pull investments in the finance is only, yeah, that's kind of a means to an end. And the campaign is really all about reputational damage and building people power to build the movement that we think that we need to win. And growing your group, getting more people on board, it's all about thinking about things in cycles. So you can see there's a point in the guide that says the growth cycle. So this is a step-by-step guide, but it's really much more useful to think of it as a process. So that you do things and then you repeat. So I'm going to go through kind of some of the steps and then talk a little bit at the end about how these might run together. And specifically, it would be really good if people could be thinking about how to join the global divestment mobilisation and whatever events you're planning with this stuff in mind. So how you can kind of bring more people on board. So promoting events and actions sounds obvious, but it's really, really important. And if you think about it cyclically, if you've got a series of things, you can advertise your event or your action at the previous one. Obviously, only if it's an open action, if you're doing something that you don't necessarily want to draw attention to, like some direct action, then this doesn't apply. But yeah, it applies to a lot of the stuff that you'll be doing. So yeah. I'll talk a little in a minute about using our email petition tool and how you can get email signups. It's really good to share things on social media. You can make flyers or posters, you can put them in local shops and community hubs, and you can give them out at your event. So planning at your event how you're going to stay in touch with people is really important. Whatever event you're running, if it's a stunt, a rally, a stall, a talk, or something else, anyone that you kind of bring in and get involved in your campaign, get interested, they're not going to be able to follow up with you unless you stay in touch. So yeah, running stalls is great. And you can use a clipboard if you don't have a stall. We've got a petition tool where you can set up a petition online with your divestment target, and then when people put their details into that, you'll get an email address. Then you can follow up and email them. You can keep them updated on your campaign. And you can also print out paper sheets with all the information about your petition, so you can take them to events, get people's details, and then go back and input them online later. We also have a really amazing event tool that if you're taking part in the Global Divestment Mobilisation, you'll see. So you can use that to promote your events and get people to sign up as well. And then when you've got people's contact details, scrolling down a little bit, it's really important that you follow up and stay in touch, so you can share updates on campaign progress, you can invite people to things, you can encourage people to share on social media and spread the word. Sending reminders is really good just before you have an event, and then updating people afterwards with pictures, information, and media coverage. And then going down again, if you want to get new members involved, you need to think about and planning how you're going to do that. So if you can advertise a follow-up event at your action, and then afterwards, you're much more likely to make it accessible to people. So kind of think about how to plan an open meeting. There's this new fossil-free DNA presentation with some guidance notes, which Tim's going to talk us through in a little while, which we have prepared to suggest that. So for example, after your events at the Global Divestment Mobilisation, you can use that presentation to update people on what's going on, how the fossil-free campaign has evolved, and how it works, and then try and bring them in to make them feel welcome. There's also lots of resources in the guide that Tim will go through for good kind of strong facilitation of groups, how to welcome new members. It's good to do things like map your new and existing skills, give new members an opportunity to share things they're good at, so you value everything in the group. Another suggestion is that you could look at buddying up new group members with existing ones to break down barriers to people feeling included. And it's really important, I think we talk about this quite a lot, but to make time to rest and recharge. So if you're planning an event for the Global Divestment Mobilisation and another one afterwards, it's good to think about, make sure that you're not stretching yourself, you're not burning out, and make space to do other stuff outside of your campaigning work for you, and make space for your group to do stuff together. Because when we're gearing up for these big periods of action, it can be quite exhausting, and it can take quite a lot of people's energy. And if you get right to the end and then you just collapse, then you don't have energy to kind of bring people in, ride on that momentum and plan the next thing. So really try and think about that. And then, yeah, the final step in this guide is just encouraging you to think about building actions in series. So this is quite a lot of stuff here. You don't necessarily need to do this many things, but if you wanted to think about building people power over a period of time, you could start by running the campaign stall, bring in petition signatures, talk to people locally about your campaign while you're running it, then follow up by email, give people some updates, build up some hype about your next action, have that action to advertise it at the campaign store, on email, on social media. And then when you have that next event, hopefully you'll have some more people along. Think about how to make it engaging, think about how to attract people. You might also want to think about sharing it with the media, if it's media worthy, and then bring your team together and debrief. Get ready for the next big thing, make sure you've got time to recharge, and then run a really big action. Make it engaging again, follow up by email again, and then follow that up with a big open meeting to try and expand your organising team. Bring new people on board, and then you'll have a whole load of new energy to channel into your next steps. So yeah, I think the things that I would emphasize about that are, think about planning in cycles, think about how you'll stay in contact with people that you bring into things, make space for new people to join in with your events and absorb people. So specifically think about hosting an event after your Global Divestment Mobilisation action. Yeah, I think that is it. Are there any, I'm just going to have a look at the chat now. I don't know if there are any questions or comments coming in. There aren't at the moment. That is fine. Yeah, we haven't got questions so far. Is there anything that you wanted to ask him, or should we go straight to your presentation?
I wonder if you would talk a little bit more about the sort of events that people might do after. So it mentions in the slide, like like an open meeting, for example? Are there other sorts of events that that people could think about holding after they've done an action, for example, as part of GDM?
So do you mean other events to kind of bring a group together? I think, yeah. I mean, I guess it could be, we have kind of discussed whether film screenings or something like that could be good, whether you could kind of hook it into something else. I mean, if you don't want to have a group event to sort of pull people in and present to new members, then you could just think about trying to funnel that energy into something else that you're already planning. So some kind of community event. I know that across Europe, the different staff that we've got have got different plans in different countries. So in Sweden in August, they're looking at organising a summer camp, which they'll be advertising, yeah, and kind of promoting throughout the Global Divestment Mobilisation. Another thing that I should also say that I totally forgot to mention is that I think it's on the 18th of May, Thursday, the 18th of May, the same time as this, we're going to have a celebration web workshop. So that could be a really good point to bring groups together to kind of watch this collectively. And yeah, and try and absorb some of the momentum, get excited about what's happened and then take things forwards. Did you have suggestions, Tim, about the sorts of events that might be useful?
Just thinking what folks in Berlin that I had kind of been in contact with through this work, and all across the region actually, after kind of these big public events that take a lot of energy and time to organize, that celebration's been really important, and bringing people together in not just in meeting spaces. Meeting spaces are really important to provide structure to the work, so don't completely ignore them. They're crucial. But bringing people together socially as well, to go and share a drink together, to just hang out in kind of spaces without an agenda. I think the relationships that are formed in those social spaces, alongside the more formal kind of meeting and meeting processes, are really crucial as well. So I encourage people to hang out and have a drink.
I think that's a really good point. And actually, we had Maker from Fossil Free Berlin on the escalation web workshop that we organised a couple of weeks ago, who was talking about some of their plans, and one of them is a party. So they have a whole series of different events planned. And then I think they're getting together to have a party, and she talked about them doing picnics and going and doing all sorts of stuff. Yeah, I think that's a really good suggestion. Tim, shall we go straight on to you talking through this presentation, and then we can see if we get some more questions or comments. Please do share them as we go through, especially if there's anything that you think would be useful to apply to your campaign, or you've got questions about how it might work. But yeah, Tim.
Cool, thanks, Tasha. So there will be a link shared at some point in the box as well with a bunch of slides. So it's essentially a presentation, as Tasha mentioned, where people can use this to help in those next events that might come after a GDM event that you look to put on. And this is, like, I think what's contained in these slides, there's a lot of information, but it's all, I would say, really accessible and quite straightforward. And one of the most important things about it is we've used this relatively kind of niche term called DNA. So I just wanted to take a moment to kind of explain what DNA is and why it's important to organising. So essentially, imagine that you've just done an event, and you've got lots of new people turning up to take part in your group, and the DNA is essentially the structure or ingredients to the recipe, the replicable elements, I guess, that allows your group to organize with the greatest amount of autonomy, but within kind of certain boundaries that allow that autonomy to create more unity, and therefore our work collectively to have a bigger impact. So if we were just all going off and doing little bits of work, really good work, focused in particular directions, and none of it was connected up either through a visual identity, through like a theory of change, through organizing principles, then it'd be really difficult to make that work bigger than the sum of its parts. And one really important thing about the fossil-free movement is generating that momentum and strength that is brought to a campaign or an organizing effort through lots of people being involved. And that's why this element of autonomy is extremely important, but is really difficult to make feel part of something bigger unless there are these kind of boundaries within that, within which that autonomy sits. So within this set of DNA slides, as I mentioned, it essentially pads out all the key core ingredients, the structure that you will need to make this work replicable and to give it that sense of being part of a bigger movement. And some key areas of the DNA, which I'd just like to highlight quickly. We won't have time to go into the details of every single slide here, but I do encourage people to get stuck in. One of the key parts is an idea called theory of change. And the theory of change with the fossil-free movement, specifically thinking around divestment, is that this concept of power and how power is held. And traditionally, folks view power as this kind of monolithic thing. There's leaders at the top that hold power and make decisions, and that we need to put pressure on those leaders to do things, to implement change on our behalf. And I think a core part of the divestment work is looking at power, kind of flipping that upside down and on its head, and realizing that people hold power, and that the most effective way, arguably, to kind of bring about significant social change is to remove the different support pillars that we refer to them as. I think it's mentioned on the slide here. So, for example, education and like the legal system, finance, which is where the divestment work's focused as well. Actually removing those different pillars that support power, rather than just trying to take it down from the top, essentially. And I think that theory of change is really important to discuss as a group, and discuss with new people when they're getting involved, so that there's just like a good common understanding about where we can kind of collectively have most impact. There's a lot more to discuss around theory of change. That's a very kind of brief, just sweep over that topic, but it's a really interesting one for people to engage with a bit more, I think. Another one would be that's contained in here is around organizing principles. And organizing principles are important because they give people a better sense of how we organize. And there's 4 specifically mentioned here about inclusivity, about open source. So the fossil-free movement is, from its inception, I guess is the word I'm after, was conceived as an open source campaign that people could take on the branding, the identity, the logos, the materials, and they could use them to build their own campaign. And so all those open source elements are really important, and the fact that like there's not going to be one leader that's going to lead us to kind of victory when it comes to climate change. We all need to step up and start organizing and taking leadership, and that kind of supports this this theory of power not just being held by one people. So we encourage people into positions of leadership and to lead their own work and campaigns. And then perhaps from a personal perspective, but I think for the fossil-free work in general, one of the most important elements is to be active, to take action. And I think that's what we're really hoping and encouraging with the global divestment mobilisation, is that people will organise events and through being out and taking action in the public, being forced into situations where you have to explain what you're doing and why to other members of the public, that those present maybe the most opportunity for you to interact with new people and to get new people involved in the work and in your group, and therefore be able to grow your kind of organising power at a local level. And maybe just one more thing to mention before passing back to Tasha is, with this, when people are talking about actions and we're thinking about how to absorb people into the organising groups that you're involved in after GDM, what this DNA, what this structure in this presentation will hopefully help you achieve is that it will be able to give people a very clear understanding of what constitutes a fossil-free campaign and what the objective of your work is. And the more clear you can be about objective from the start when you're talking to new people, the more easily it will be to bring those people into active roles within your group. And maybe worth mentioning one common problem that folks often get with bringing new people into group situations, into group organising. And I'm done with the slides now, so we can take them down if that's okay. One common problem that we find with bringing new people into these group situations is, if there's not a really clear understanding of the structure and the ingredients and the purpose of the work, that there's often many different ideas that can be brought to the table in terms of how to be active on climate issues. And it's great that there are lots of ways to organise around this, and that autonomy is really important. But if within a group, if different people are trying to organise in different directions with different theories of change, then it can be a real challenge to get a group kind of into a bit of a groove of organising together. So by going through and discussing the contents of this kind of DNA presentation with new folks as they first look to get involved, maybe the next event you do after a GDM event is an open meeting, as Tasha mentioned. And by presenting to new folks these slides and discussing some of the contents of them, that will hopefully allow you to get off to a really solid start in terms of incorporating those new people into the work and everyone pulling in the same direction. I could probably carry on talking forever, so I should probably finish there, Tasha, and hand back over to you.
Great, thanks, Tim. Yeah, it's really good to have a kind of whip through of those slides. People should be able to see in the Google slideshow that we've made, there are notes for each of them in terms of presentation, so they give a lot more information. Tim, one question I had was about, it might be good to talk about if people feel like they want more information or more support with any of this stuff. Is there, like, what would you recommend that they do in terms of getting in contact with 350 staff? Or
I think the easiest thing there, like on the fossil free website, there are for local regional organisers, and on the campaign's website there's like a map with all the different divestment initiatives that are currently underway, and through that tool you can get in contact with folks directly who are organising and ask questions. And then like, I think most groups have Facebook channels where actively on the kind of walls and feeds on those Facebook channels, people can ask questions and get the collective wisdom from more than just a handful of people who are working on this. So there are a bunch of kind of digital tools and ways that people can get answers to questions that they're finding challenging.
Great, thanks. I've just shared a link to the staff page in the chat. So the countries where we have staff directly supporting are France, Germany, Sweden, the Netherlands and the UK. And other European countries are supported by myself and my colleague Nicolo. So there should be somebody that can give you a hand. But yeah, actually, if there's a local group that's already working near you that you can find on the map on the Fossil Free website, or find things on Facebook, it's really good to be able to get directly in touch with people. And yeah, I think that I think it might be good for us to keep it quite short tonight, because we've done quite a lot of these web workshops. I really hope that this will be a good resource and that it will be used. It will be used in future to go with the guide that we've written and the presentation that we've made, and that this stuff is helpful. But yeah, just before we kind of finish and I summarize, I just wanted to say that when I was making this stuff, I found it so inspiring working on this campaign. I've been a campaigner for a very long time, and yeah, this is the fastest growing divestment campaign in history. There are thousands of campaigns happening. It's happening across 6 continents. The number of different institutions that have divested, the number of people that have got involved, the momentum that it's been built is so exciting. And it feels like, you know, climate change is such a big, difficult issue to tackle, but it really does feel like with this campaign, we are building the momentum to start to address it, and we're chipping away at the legitimacy of the fossil fuel industry as a business to operate. And so I want to say thank you to everyone who's putting their time into this and working so hard to make this campaign what it is. You're all really amazing, and I hope you do some great stuff for the global divestment mobilisation, and that these things are useful. So yeah, I guess just kind of key takeaways from me: plan stuff in advance if you can. Plan 1 or 2 events or actions in advance, and then you can use those to advertise what's coming next. Keep in contact with people, use the digital tools and the email lists, make space for new people to join. Think about having some events to absorb that energy after the global divestment mobilisation. There's a future webinar on Thursday, May the 18th, which I mentioned, which will be a celebration of everything that happens around the world for the global divestment mobilisation, which is really exciting and really worth joining. There's also a Swedish webinar happening on April the 11th at 8 p.m, and I will share a link to that in the chat in a minute. And yeah, it's all about people power and building numbers and how we're stronger together. So do think about how you can use your GDM activities to try and build on that. Register your events at globaldivestmentmobilisation.org and join the Facebook event, which I'll also share in the chat. Tim, is there anything that you would like to say else that you'd like to say before we wrap this up?
Just couldn't support more what you were saying about be out there, be public, organise in front of people. Like, just don't be scared to be out there. It's really important. And you're on mute.
I always do this at the end. I've done this at the end of like every single web workshop that I've done, and the last thing that I've said has been muted. Yeah, that's it basically. Thanks so much, everyone. Good night.